Hello everyone and welcome to Lobby Legends Noblegarden. I'm Raven and joining me to kick this off is Subtle. We've got a lot of action this weekend. It's going to be the second Hearthstone Battlegrounds Lobby Legends tournament of the year, but it's going to look a lot different than the one we saw a little bit earlier on, brought to us with Gia and Slissa. Subtle, welcome. How's it going? And I imagine you are very ready to start the day.
Indeed. I'm looking forward to it. It's an early start, but it's fine. We can brush that aside because there is so much hype going into this tournament. You know, Battlegrounds players have kind of been flying the flag for a while. They've been shouting from the rooftops, we want to be part of the competitive Hearthstone ecosystem. Well, now guess what, friends? You're absolutely part of the club because you have to play a major tournament on about 72 hours reaction to a major patch. And that is a large part of what competitive Hearthstone seems to be about. Massive new patch coming in. Yes, exactly. Massive new patch coming in, not only with the new tribe, the Naga coming through, but also some key minions leaving the game. Amalgadon going out, regular Amalgam coming back in now as a Tavern 3 minion. Leroy Jenkins coming in as well as a big meta shakeup. There is so much to unpack with this new meta game, beyond the fact that most people are going to be looking for Naga throughout most of their games, I'm sure, because they are very, very strong.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about and a lot to dig into as we go on throughout today and tomorrow. But for now, let's take a look at just what these couple of days are going to look like. If you're not familiar, of course, like I mentioned, this is only the second Lobby Legends tournament so far. And it's not looking like a lot right now. So, Subtle, why don't you just verbally do our job well and verbally explain what Lobby Legends is going to look like for today and tomorrow?
Yeah, pack it up. We've actually got an empty schedule for the next 2 days or so we can just end it here. No, just kidding. Here we go. So we have had a very long process to get to this point even. It's a long qualifying period. It starts with the Battlegrounds ladder, and then top 16 players come through from that, play in qualifiers to even get to this point to the broadcast tournament. We are left with the very best of the best after that has boiled down, split up into 2 different lobbies, Lobby A and Lobby B, each containing 8 players playing games of Battlegrounds with 8 players in each. And then the top 4 from each of those lobbies will go through to Sunday, where we'll do it all again with the now infamous Czech format after Be Nice, you know, showing how it was done in the first tournament, which we'll get into a little more when it becomes more relevant moving on through the tournament.
Yeah, the only thing I will add on to that is I can imagine every player already is just thinking, if I make it to Sunday, I hope that doesn't happen to me. You know, like it just like one player just runs away with the whole tournament as quickly as possible. Because again, today we have those 2 8-player lobbies. They're only playing 3 games each, and the top cuts go through, right? So 3 games, as you know, I'm sure you are well aware, Sol, does not feel like a lot when these are the points values, right? You know, 8th 0 going all the way up to first place, getting 7 points. Add all them together after 3 games, and then you've got your top finishers out of each lobby. But this is like the pressure on just 3 games of Battlegrounds is so high for these players because someone has to finish 8th, someone has to finish 7th, and so on. And if you finish in those bottom like 2-3 spots, the pressure is on to actually not only just do well and you know, I'd say like 4th upwards, maybe 3rd upwards is what I would say is doing well in a lobby, but to potentially have to win to claw yourself back with any chance of actually finishing in the top cut.
Yeah, it's not a big sample individually. Of course, the amount of games on ladder that you play to get here, and then the qualifiers, and then this all factored in, you know, you are still looking at people who've proven themselves to be consistent over a large period of time. But I'm sure we've all had it, right, where we play 3 games and we get like 5th, 6th, 8th or something in those 3 games. But if you zoom out and look at your last 20 games, you're climbing and you're doing well overall. And that was just a temporary blip, right? This can happen to any of us. If that happens now, today, for any of these players in Lobby Legends, they're cooked and they can go home and they're not going through to Sunday, right? And that is going to be a big problem for the way things are going. I would say as well, like you said, with that first loss, if you do get it early, you then have to kind of chase the win a lot more heavily by going with greedier lines. I wouldn't say that would necessarily have an impact on what I'm expecting to see in this tournament, because I feel like chasing the win is the one thing that you can do anyway, which we'll dig into a little bit later on when we get get into more specific strategies. But we can take a look at what's on the line, at least in terms of dollary-do amounts, Raven.
Yeah, one benefit, as you said, if you have a rough day and that's just the way it is, it does happen. All is not lost, because although you wouldn't qualify through to tomorrow, there is effectively that minimum prize pool, right? So just for being able to qualify into this Lobby Legends tournament, the players have earned something at least. But that first place prize, $10,000. And when we talk, we'll look at the players shortly, but when you realize that's $10,000 for this as a potential first place prize, but we're seeing multiple repeat players from the previous Lobby Legends tournament, and this is something I definitely expect to see going forward in Battlegrounds, in that, as you mentioned a lot so far, like the consistency and just effort required to top 16 ladder, then make it through the qualifier itself, then perform well in this, the actual Lobby Legends tournament, is so difficult that we are seeing these players, the sort of players you see always in contention at the top of the ladder month in, month out, just be saying like, yeah, these players probably have a good chance at seeing them in the next Lobby Legends tournament as well, or at least in the qualifier.
Yeah, for sure. Sample sizes being what they are, I think when you expose everyone to the open field on ladder, you're going to see a lot of the same players hanging around at the top. As mentioned, what then happens in the few games that you get to play in the qualifiers is a little bit more up in the air, right? But in terms of the same players being in the qualifier tournaments over and over again, yeah, absolutely. And then I think, just by sheer weight of odds, we will see a few of the same players showing up this time. But having said that, looking at Lobby A, we are looking at a few new faces here, at least in terms of Battleground. I don't know about you, Raven. I'm pretty hyped to be casting Zixo again, because it has been a while. One of the absolute best constructed players from way back in the day. It felt like a weekly, monthly activity for Zixo, where he'd just rock up and win like 20 grand in a 16-player online invitational or something. Like that just seemed to be his day job, his meat and potatoes, and now he is more of a Battlegrounds gamer and taking just as quickly to this format as well. Alucard, both are America's representatives as well. Of course, Roger being thrown in there as well, which is a name that we haven't heard for a while as well. Some very interesting prospects going through Lobby A here.
Yeah, and then we have SJMR, Kid, and Sao King from China as well, representing our region over there. So we'll see how they do. Honestly, names I'm not familiar with. I think it's...
well, SJ is a repeat from the previous tournament, which is the only one on that list, I believe. Yeah, so that is a big deal.
I was going to say, with the other two, it's like the problem, I guess, we used to have in Constructed going back a few years now, where we didn't get to see the Chinese players compete as often. So we just didn't know the players well enough. Obviously, with the Masters Tour system, we just see them finish first every time now. So we know a lot of them by now. And I expect that to, start to get the ball rolling with Lobby Legends, because already we've seen, a back-to-back player from China, as well as just multiple Chinese players coming into the tournaments we've had so far. So really excited to get into this lobby. But you are right, a player like Zixo I will be keeping my eye on, because it's the type of player that really annoys me. Because it's just this type of player who's like, I feel like being good at this game mode. Right, I'll just play, or I'll just crush everyone. And it's just like, I wish I could do that. I'm very jealous.
Honestly, I feel like you went far too deep into that sentence. If you'd have just said, yeah, Zixo, the kind of person that really annoys me, and then just stopped there, I think we would have all been fine with that. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing Bofa as well. Bofa is a person whose stream I watch a ton. I feel like I say this a lot on stream, and then people will like DM me like, wait, you watch my stream? Like, yeah, I am the biggest lurker on the internet, okay? Like, I don't actually hang out in your chat as much as most people will do, but I'm out there. I'm always watching something. I'm not sleeping, so I have to be doing it. But yeah, Bofa is a player that I've really enjoyed watching, a player that I've learned a lot from. I think he has an excellent, concise, focused way of like breaking down what is a high variance game and a high variance situation. I think he has a very good mindset and a very good skill set for tournament Battlegrounds play as well. So looking forward to seeing a lot from him.
And while we are getting the lobby ready, getting everyone good to go again with 8 players, wrangling those players and making sure everyone's, ready to go so there's no issues going forward. Very important job, so shout out to admins for that one. I just want to ask, with the removal of buddies, the addition of Naga, just the game changing dramatically overall. What are you looking for? Is it going to be players who are just going for Naga, or at least in the short time we've had to prepare? Have you seen anyone experiment with, well, what comps that aren't Naga do you go for? Because I'll say, with everyone going for one minion type, you've always got the problem of, especially at the higher tiers, there just aren't the good minions left to get if you don't hit them first.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Here's my very quick, in a capsule meta breakdown of what we have right now. I am a journalist of great integrity, so I'm not going to lie to you. Nagas are the best tribe by a lot right now. Like, that is clear. However, solving this game to maximize MMR over a short sample is still very, very difficult. You have to understand when you're in control to spike and actually win the lobby with the Athissa or the Orgazoa pickup. If you're not in that position, that's when the game gets interesting, right? Forget about how mechanically complex the Naga stuff can get to. We'll deal with that later, but there's still a lot of like skill expression thrown into that as well. What do you do if you don't just triple into a 6 and hit the Naga stuff early on? I think that's a really good question. I personally think you have to avoid falling into the trap of actually taking some other kind of minion type synergy and just really scaling it, right? Like scaling Quillbores, scaling Murlocs. I think that is generally a mistake. I think if you don't have Quillbores, the only other things that you can do are like Poison Scam, or something that I've been seeing a lot more recently and something that I've now brought into my toolkit as well is just big cleave scam, which I think is like a super underrated way of just gaining MMR in a rough situation. Just making a massive Foe Reaper, massive Hydra, giving it Wind Fury with the Spellcraft, particularly with mechs, abusing some of the magnetic synergy that you can get with Spellcraft as well, to just make really, really huge minions and just try and kill a few Naga players while they're at that 20-20-30-30 stage, and you just have a 40-40 Wind Fury Divine Shield cleave on the other side, right? And you just try and murder a few people that way. There are things that you can do. However, one final caveat. We expected a certain meta going into Hearthstone Global Invitational for Battlegrounds as well. Everyone on ladder knew how you did it. You tripled into 4s, you found milkers, you set up your milker board. That's how you played the game. In HGI, the competitive players that we had in that tournament said, no, we're not letting you do that. We're buying Soul Juggler, we're buying Meccano Tank, we're buying everything that we possibly can to deal damage to you early so that you cannot milk. And that took us all by surprise. So we could be wrong again in what we're expecting to see in this tournament. I don't think I am. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Naga winning lobbies. But still, these players have had some time to cook up counter strategies, so they might just be offering something that we're not necessarily expecting.
And also, it's the big difference, right? Because when you're talking about strategy and approaches to winning, winning lobbies isn't necessarily what you have to do in Lobby Legends, right? At least for day one. We'll talk about day 2 later. So again, it's that thing of if you don't start the ball rolling with Naga, that you can just go hyper aggressive and say, I'll try and push people out and then just try and land a top 4. If you're getting really unlucky and you're not getting any comps that are like hard scaling, you could just go to that and sort of play aggressive, take sort of hoover up the other good minions from different minion types, and then just pressure people out. It's something I've been trying really, where I've just been buying the best stuff, the most sort of aggressive tempo style minions for at least the first part of the game, maybe even a bit longer than I should. And then, yeah, if I can get some of the good Naga a little bit later on, triple into them and such, I will then switch, because the scaling you get can actually be ridiculous, right? The scaling catches up if you actually hit it early enough. It's kind of silly, honestly.
Yeah, that is the funny part to me, as to how late you can transition to full Naga and it still be plus MMR. Yeah. Like, it's really outrageous sometimes. But, you know, to me, the idea you're saying you don't have to play for the win, you can just push for 4th, I think that's what Big Cleave and Poison Leroy Scam does. I think if you go other tribes and just start scaling Quillbore or Murloc or whatever, that gets 5th, 6th most of the time, because you're still going to lose to the Poison Scam players, you're still going to lose to the Big Cleave players, you're still going to lose to the people who've hit Naga. So I find in that position it's probably still best to not get baited by going with other minion types and just stick with just, you know, max tempo, find some poison, find some Leroys, go from there. But looks like we do finally have a game on our hands.
Yeah, I am more than ready to go. Lobby A game 1, first game of the day. Can't wait to get into it, and we're checking out Kid on Finley as well. So, not off to the best start against Alakir. Always a character that you just want to avoid on turn 1 at least, because you just know you're going to lose unless something truly ridiculous has happened. But the armor there is going to keep him at least okay for now. But overall, Sol, what are you making of this this hero choice so far? Because the way I can see it, nothing mega powerful except for maybe Eunice on the Vol'jin.
Yes, interestingly, we do have a little bit of extra tracker technology going into this one. They decided, of course, I couldn't have the easy job of only having to watch one board at a time, so they've given me the ability to at least watch simulated versions of what everyone's doing at the same time. I did notice that SJMR turned down Queen Ashara for Edwin, if our tracking is correct, which is a surprising pick for me for sure. Queen Ashara, very first or 8th-ish hero in my opinion. However, dragons being out of this lobby, I think, might have had a big impact. Queen Ashara, new hero, kind of has a quest to complete where you have to get 30 attack worth of minions on your board. The easiest way to do that is, of course, with Chroma Wing, who scales massive amounts of attack in the early game. So with dragons out, I think that's put SJMR, our returning Chinese player, off that Ashara pick and is going with an Edwin, a very middle-of-the-road hero pick overall.
Here we see Sixo on that Ragnaros as well, starting to pop off with the early demons. And again, this is... He's staying on 1, so it's still quite low, but you generally will have to do that if you...
I was just shouting cat. It was far more important than everything you were talking about.
Was it though? I'm giving in-depth analysis. Anyway, the benefit here is it will help just Sixo be very strong early on, and you can really farm up that hero power from Ragnaros, right, and get that active as early as possible, because he just will win the next few fights, almost certainly.
Yeah, Zixo also, I believe, turned down a Shudderwock in his hero choices, which to me is one of the best heroes for straight up first in the game right now. However, it requires Beasts being in, and you can see up in the top right, Beasts also banned. So straight away, you can see the impact that which minion types are in play has on these players and their decision-making overall. Big deal. Both players that we've looked at so far, or 2 of the players that we've looked at so far, SJMR and Zixo, have kind of had to take probably weaker overall heroes because the minion types just did not line up very well. But speaking of lining up well, Spellcraft, Snail, Vol'jin. This is basically exactly what you want in this scenario, and you can even pick up a cheeky extra couple of stats on the Snail, going that first Snail. The first time you cast a spell every turn gains 2 health, continues to do that every turn for the entire game, which makes all of these minions that Vol'jin has right now excellent synergy with that hero power. Vol'jin also one of the characters that can cheat with Spellcraft. Spellcraft's supposed to be temporary stats. However, if you swap those temporary stats onto another minion with the Vol'jin hero power, you get to keep them permanently. So this is basically the start. This is what you are looking for in this metagame. Exactly that. Now you're strong, now you level, now you triple, and then you see if you hit that 6 to win the game.
Yeah, really tricky scenario as well with those snails to work out how to play that turn, right? Because when you cast the spell, the snails gain health. But if you cast the spell on a minion in the shop and then swap it, well, the snail will have gained health, so you're swapping away more health if you target the snail. So Eunice just had to do that in like what could have been seen as a weird order, but with the snails specifically on board, and made perfect sense. But he is going to get chomped a little bit, even though his board is very strong indeed.
The battle is really raging out there.
Take a look at Bofa here on the Alakir. Murloc start, but yet again, like I said, Bofa's a smart player. He will know this, but he is not Murlocs at this point. Do not be fooled. He has bought these things because they were either the best economy or the most tempo that he could find in the early game to try and defend his health. He will be looking to find a triple into a 6-drop, as many people will be doing throughout this game.
And you said best economy or the best tempo. I think it's kind of both right now.
It is kind of
like
both,
you got the coin from the Naga, and then obviously the Tads can sort of naturally cheaper because when you sell them, you gain an additional minion anyway. So it's looking good in the way you would rather it not be, but at least it's looking good for Bofa, right? He would rather have those like powerful sort of scaling Nagas a little bit earlier on, but he's doing okay so far. One thing I'm very interested in, Sol, is just seeing already how quickly players are going to jump to Tavern Tier 5 and 6, because I've seen, especially as the mere days we've had to test it out have gone on, as each day passes, you see people leveling quicker and quicker and quicker, or at least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of a bell curve where I guess at lower ranks, people will make the mistake of not leveling very hard. At slightly higher ranks, people have got the memo, right? So they level super hard, and then at very high ranks, you'll see a mix, right? Because then you'll find the players that recognize they can't level because they've kind of hit that point of having to scrap for 4th or 5th. However, I will say that even scrapping for 4th does tend to involve leveling, because that's where Manted Queen and Leroy and all the things that you tend to need, Foe Reaper, all that stuff that you need to scam a few extra ranks over the course of the game do tend to be on the high Tavern tiers anyway. So I think this meta is really finding ways to level wherever possible, really abusing that damage cap as much as you can in most positions.
We'll just quickly point out as well, just in case people are wondering, the scoreboard's not quite correct because Roger's stuck at the top and not on Eudora. I believe Roger's playing Mutinous, who's currently in 7th spot. So just kind of ignore Roger's first place sitting at the top there. Pretend it doesn't exist and he's further down. Keep an eye on the little Mutinous in the bottom left there. But yeah, sorry about that. We will get that fixed going forward. But still, what do you make of these choices here? I mean, to me, it's just all, if it says Naga, you pick it. It's also the +8 damage is nothing to be ignored. But looks like Zixo is actually going to go onto the Quillbot instead.
Dynamic Duo is certainly a piece of a composition that can throw a lot of stats everywhere. If you get the new Dark Gaze Elder on Quillbot, and Dynamic Duo is absolutely one of the minions you are going to want to have, which may have just been the motivation there from Zixo. It was also the individually biggest minion, I suppose, just most tempo right then. But I think also an interesting thing to look at is it was a triple into a 4, right? Just forget about what the actual options were and what ended up happening. That decision to take a 4 instead of greeding super hard for a 6 is very, very interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, again, we just see Zixo really focusing on going for that hero power, getting active as quickly as possible. We are going to go over to Salking, though, who's going to be on those blood gems, and this is a big one, right? I know you've played a lot of this hero, so how important are these blood gems? Did it make as big an impact as I think a few people theorized before the patch hit? Yeah,
they're so huge. Honestly, I don't end up using that many of them for actual spellcraft synergy or spell synergy, you know, with the Athissa late in the game. It's just the fact that you get to level and you get rewarded for leveling. I think characters that do that in this meta, Omu, Blackthorn, all of these characters are very heavily rewarded, because you just want to level, and having things like 2 extra mana for leveling like Omu gets, or 2 blood gems for leveling, just help you defend tempo a little bit, save some health, and you just get incentivized to just go to 6 that much quicker. And if you do get there, and if you manage to be incredibly strong, speaking of incredibly strong, we found our first incredibly strong player of the game with the Orgazoa. So yeah, if you get into this position, say, as Blackthorn, and then you have a bunch of blood gems still to spare, then obviously you can perhaps hold on and wait for that greedy Athissa synergy to really pump your board immediately. But boy, oh boy, Alucard has hit, and it is looking like he is going to be the one to watch in this lobby right now, because just scanning through everyone else, I do not see a 6-drop Naga on anyone else's board right now.
Right. He's currently the only player on Tavern Tier 5 that I can see, and also 29 health, so it's fine, right? He can take a hit or two and still be more than okay, because it's such a short window of time it takes to actually benefit from these potential scaling options. Gonna take 7 now, go down to 22, so obviously wouldn't have liked to take that much damage, but still, I think it's fine, because other players are still having to play catch up, and at some point, the other players will spend a good chunk of gold on leveling, right? And that's where you'd imagine Alucard will really snap back as he's got yet another choice at a Discover Naga this turn. I wonder if he's thinking of level and then Discover, because I would not hate it. The only question I've got is he has a Leroy on board and he has a ticket on board to go out, so...
Well, the ticket on board, I was almost using as an argument to level, because he could have leveled, discovered something from the potential pool of 6, sold the micro mummy and the pot, bought a ticket, and then this would have been a 6 as well. So he would have potentially had 2 bites at the Athissa Cherry or additional Orgazoid at that point, whichever way you want to go about it. I think it was enticing with that 22 health available, but now finally we see Sow King now caught up as well. He joins the party, finds the Orgazoa as well, and has a much more impactful board at doing so. He will be in the position, I'm sure, to just level straight to 6 next turn with this level of strength. Key point right now, neither player that we've seen with an Orgazoa has a Siren, and I think that is the first key point of synergy that you really want with that Orgazoa, because it just starts feeding you straight up economy first and foremost. Just raw number of cards in hand at the end of the turn is fantastic. You're getting you know, free milker essentially just by having the minion on board without any combat RNG, but then also just the ability to get additional strong minions and triples and so on that synergy generates. I think Siren is the first order of business for both of these players right now.
You know, he's going to be facing Roger, I believe, and this is the slight problem that we were talking about that people who aren't really full Naga are going to face. Obviously, Roger's making a kind of way to transform into Naga with their Mutinous Hero power, but the minions get so big so fast, and Sow King isn't even really popping off as Naga, right? He's just getting the good stuff at the moment, but still winning that fight and pushing damage on Roger even more, who's currently sitting in 8th place so far.
Oh, hello, beautiful.
Oh, there you
we
go.
see our first one, Thissa, being found here for Yanase. We may differ, by the way, on how we say this name. I did try and research pronunciations as best as I could. We're not sure on this one. I'm saying Yanase. Raven can say what he likes. I don't really mind. But we're finally here with the Athissa, and now we're going to see some of that Blood Gem synergy. This is one of the big boons of having Quillbore in the lobby, is you get those extra spells that can go very nicely with Athissa. Now we get to have the debate, Raven, which I'm sure is going to annoy quite a few people, where I'm going to say the slightly controversial statement that having these 2 lava lurkers on Yanase's board might actually be to his detriment at this point, because those 2 lava lurkers are minions that do not get procced at the end of the turn by Siren. And when Siren procs spellcraft minions at the end of the turn, it does activate Athissa, which means you're getting auto-passive scaling at the end of your turn for every spellcraft generating minion that you have in play, which Lava Lurker is not. That is how it works, despite the fact that's not how it worded. Yes, it annoys me, and hopefully we will get that cleared up at some point, one way or the other. But hey, what do I know? Just hit the triple, and that solves the problem for you nice and easy.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great outcome to hit that triple and freeze there. But one thing I was looking at is actually hero powering the snail stats onto a lava and using that potentially to sell to gain some space, because in the late game, as we can see a big fight happening right now, in the late game, Naga is all about controlling board spaces and getting the most out of each space in itself. And as you said, there are too many minions currently for Yanasi, I think you said, that don't do anything active.
That is a huge fight, a huge outcome, but that damage cap still being in place meant that Alucard was always going to be safe. We can see Alucard has gone to 6 as well. Everyone else still 1 turn behind. He did do it with the smallest board. We saw that when he hit his Orgazoa, but because he did it a turn earlier, he's now been the one going to 6. And yes, he's been hit hard for it. Yes, he's on 2 HP, but he is in a wonderful position overall. Lava Lurker triple now, looking for additional juice, and there is the Orgazoa as well.
Was that actually a wrong order, or am I just being really stupid? I guess, no, the order didn't matter, right? Just because he was tripling to exactly the golden lava lurker, he put the buffs on the minion, swapped it, but the buffs would have stuck anyway, right? Because he only cast 2 spells on it regardless. So yeah, it didn't matter. Yeah, I thought there was something there, but we are going to jump over to Alucard now. 2 health and a dream, and this was so, it looks so good. He did hit, like, you know, hit some big stuff early on, get that tavern leveled up to 6 relatively fast as well, but he hasn't actually hit the Thissers, right? Like, he's not actually hit anything that's a big payoff. As you mentioned earlier, no Siren. There's the double critter Wranglers in there as well, but not enough self buffs going on with Wranglers. You really need a Siren on the board in some shape or form. Does have it now, of course, so he will be able to start stacking those buffs, but stacking those buffs on 2 health is maybe a little bit too late.
Well, I mean, it depends, right? You check your opponents in this position, you see what they're showing as. I believe Kid will be showing as mechs 4 or 5, depending on what the board state is. We're looking at current board state. Obviously, the sidebar tracker, in-game tracker, will look 1 turn ago. Someone showing as mechs at this point, I think you're feeling fairly comfortable to do whatever you want. As long as that thing does not say Naga, I think you'd feel relatively comfortable that you can take this out. However, Kid on the other side with a really smart play. It's small odds, but it's odds. There is 1 poison minion hanging out on that right-hand side, which gives him 1 particular juicy attack that might be able to bail him out of this. That's it right there! Oh, it's going to be a tie. It's going to be a tie, but for a brief moment, the current king of the Naga, Alucard, in control, on 6, having the juice, could have just been killed there. And we do see, I believe, Mutinous, Roger the Mysterious Mutinous, is actually going out in 8th. So just for maximum irony, the bugged player who's going to be stuck in 1st place on our sidebar tracker is actually in 8th.
Yeah, and that was huge. The Poison Sephim was... Yeah, and that was the issue and kind of what I was meaning from Alucard. He had the Golden Myrmidon, which is huge, but it's 1 big minion. When there's Leroy in the game, when there's Poison in the game, you know, it's likely to do well, but we saw the opportunity of him going out. But Alucard survived, which means he's getting, at worst, 7th now, dodged that 8th place at 0 points. But now checking out Zixo, he's going to pick up the glow scale. And it's one thing I really like about Naga being in the lobbies is... Yes, Naga are very strong, fine, but you can also use them as just like almost battle cry effects, right? You can cycle them through on any given turn, even if you're not Naga, and just say, well, this will beef up my turn for 1 turn at an absolute worst. And I really like that, you know, they've got that extra sort of effect, even in comps that aren't actually, you know, pushing hard on Naga. Okay, Bofa, calm down.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. Again, I believe Bofa will be streaming his own perspective here if you want to go check him out personally. But I've watched enough of his stream to know exactly what he's saying right now. And it's like, well, you know, this is the game. We're playing a mini game right now. The mini game is, did we hit Nagas? We didn't hit Nagas this game, so here we are. We're trying to fight for tempo. We've got 2 Meccano tanks, trying to poison scam as best we can. He absolutely understands the assignment here, and he is fighting for tempo as aggressively as humanly possible.
And I think now, as we see the fight go out, this is the biggest difference between a great player and an okay player, right? An okay player would just die, whereas a great player is going to find these creative ways to try and just yoink games.
Sorry, these Meccano tanks are just doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, the Myrmidon's not having any of it, is he?
Just pounding damage into a 150 health minion.
Kills 1 of the bigger minions at least, right? Like Myrmidon at 5, so he saves 5, takes 15. Here again, dangerous situation now for Bofa, but at least he's trying. Oh, and Zixo's out, right? He was on Ragnaros.
Yeah, he was on Ragnaros.
And Roger's completely out. He's not even on the board now.
This kind of illustrates my point as well. Zixo, hard tempo, scaling Wrathweavers, 2 30-30s. One of them had Divine Shield. He had a glow scale in play as well. Pushing as hard as he possibly could with a different minion type. Just got murdered by Naga. Yeah. You can't do it, right? It just doesn't work. I'm not calling what Zixo was doing a mistake. That's very possibly what he was dealt by Bob. We didn't really follow him a great deal during that game. But I do think it illustrates the point that that is just not what anyone wants to be doing in these hobbies.
I think when you are forced or choose to do that, you have to hope you hit the weakest Naga player, right? and then dodge for at least a little
Not
bit.
at all.
Are there that many not Naga players, though, in your average lobby? So
Right.
that's my question. So you have to just hope you don't hit the one that's really popping off. This is looking solid, though, from King. Has the cleave. It's not huge right now, but again, there are buffs that Naga can generate that can make it huge, especially from the Archer is the main one, especially when it's golden, like just the plus 16 attack going through, and maybe with some help from some other minions as well. But looking decent. It's not mega scaling yet, but the tools are there.
What I'm particularly curious about is this replicating menace in King's hand. Because replicating menace, so magnetic minions on mechs have a pretty interesting interaction right now where you can actually spellcraft them in the shop. I mean, you can do that to any minion, but it makes sense to do it on a magnetic minion. And then pick them up and dump them, like on your Foe Reaper, for example, where they are then transformed into permanent stats and permanent effects. So I find it kind of interesting there's a replicating menace in his hand right now that's not being used. He might have just felt like he couldn't really open up the board space in a satisfying way to make the magnetic happen in that position. But very curious about what the plan for this menace is going to be over the next turn or two.
I wonder if it's... Oh, well, there we go. We are going to see the draw going out there. But I wonder if it's some kind of tech in that if he needs to, he can drop the menace on the golem, move it across just a little bit, and then maybe the 1/1s can ping divine shields, because in the late game, Naga can actually generate 1 million divine shields, potentially. So maybe that's something, but I do agree, I think the stat buffs are huge in general, but of course aren't going to be here for King now that he's spent the turn not playing it.
And we do see SJMR, Bofa, biting the dust as well. Bofa did everything that we could do from what we saw. Didn't see too much of SJMR in particular, but this is what they are up against. If you don't hit this stuff, you are going to be in trouble. This is what your board is supposed to look like at this point. I would even argue, what is this, turn 13? I'd say this is actually fairly small for this period of the game in terms of like what the biggest person, the bully in the lobby, is supposed to be doing. And this is still on Tavern 5, by the way.
Look at the swap on the Thissa as well. That's pretty huge. Game Bristleback Knight to just really power through. Really strong effect as well with the Frenzy. And this is what I was talking about earlier with the sort of fast battle cry style Naga, where you just go, give me the spell, sell, give me the spell, sell, and just cycle through your turn like that to just get maximum amount of buffs that you can really do here. So looking good so far for really relying on the Bristleback Knight.
Stronger as well when there are Quillbore in the lobby as well, right? She just gets so many extra targets in the shop that can dump blood gems into your hand, give you those additional spells, really start pumping those Athissas. Yeah, really cute little play, making the huge Divine Shield Wind Fury Frenzy minion as well. Massive output, and obviously, like, yeah, you can take those stats off Athissa. She's going to get them right back eventually, you know? It's not going to be a huge detriment to the overall state of your board. And I think this was the understanding from Yanase, right? To say, okay, I'm up against another one of the bullies in the lobby. I'm up against another Naga player. I'm going to maximum tempo king this turn and give myself every possibility of killing this player now so I don't have to deal with them again in a couple of fights turn. And it's going to pay out massively as Yanase, I think, does now establish himself as the absolute alpha bully of this lobby, taking out everyone else.
Yeah, and we see there as well, Alucard Kid going away as well. Alucard, though, securing that top 4, even though he did get ahead in the lobby very, very quickly indeed in terms of Tavern level, he did look weaker when he did so, right? There is that moment, you know, he went down to 2 health, but stuck it out and landed a top 4, so not too bad of a start for him. So far, but now it's just going to be between King and Yanase here, and both players, Sol, guess what? Are popping off with Naga. Who would have thought it? I am shocked.
Yeah. Difficult mechanical turn to have here. Try and get as much value out of this as possible. Okay, gives up 1 short of the maximum spellcraft. Did not play one of those minions, but I think board space concerns make that relatively impossible. You could argue, I think fairly accurately, that this Orgazoa is not going to hang around on the board for the end of the turn, so it might have been worth just getting it out preemptively.
Yeah,
to make room for a spellcraft to go in.
I'm actually quite surprised it's still there. For me, it's one of the best minions that goes the first, if that makes sense. Like, I get rid of it early because it isn't, as you can see, it's not gaining buffs because it is not a Naga, even though, of course, it has like incredible Naga synergy. He is just trying to gain max value from it instead. Does have the dynamic duo tech cards of a Mantid Queen and Leroy, two of the new cards that I think everyone likes to pick up at least one or two of and hold if needed. Going to be choosing to drop the Leroy down now and just look at the size of this board. My only question is, how strong is this golem right now for him?
What's a golem?
Golem.
Oh. The Foe Reaper, you mean?
Foe Reaper. Sorry, that's my own terms. I always just call it Harvest Golem because, or just Golem, because that's what it is.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
It's the same as a Harvest Golem. It's just a boss version of one, basically. So yeah, in my own head,
this is where I'm going to get on my high horse and saying that, like, just knowing things about lore just actually made life more confusing for everyone.
That's fair. That's fair.
You know, like,
yeah.
Just be ignorant about everything to do with Warcraft. Yeah. It just makes the game better.
What's that snake person?
Exactly.
Like that.
But back to the actual interesting decisions here. I do think, so Sal King got greedy here with the Orgazoa, and it's fine. You can see that he could afford to lose that fight in most situations and not die because of the amount of health he had. I do think the opportunity was potentially there to look at it the other way around, though, and just say, well, if I got incredibly strong right now, sold the Orgazoa for another Leroy or a Mantid Queen or something to you know, get Divine Shield Poison something in play, maybe I can deal 21 to my opponent. But I don't necessarily think that's true either. Surprisingly, even though late game Naga boards are kind of full of 5, 6, 4-drops, you don't tend to do that much damage to each other when it comes down to the final showdown. It's normally only 1 or 2 minions that end up living. It's very rare that you're just that much bigger than your opponent going into that spot. So I think expecting to do 15 or less damage at a time is fairly reasonable, which makes Sal King's decision to kind of hold on to the Orgazoid milk a little bit longer pretty smart. And now we're seeing Sal King go with Taunted Leroy
here we go.
as well in response to what Yanase might be doing on the other side, which is a very, very big deal indeed. We'll have to see what the reaction is on the other side, because this is a very curious meta to play around. Leroy positioning on both sides. We'll see if Yanase has moved a smaller minion up first as a bumper, and he has. This is now a huge outcome as to where this goes, and that is the good attack for the Vol'jin in that position for sure.
Yeah, now we are going to see... Oh, that was huge.
Oh. Yeah, Divine Shield sided off first before going into the poison. And that is now going to be another tie as we go back to the well one more time with these players having to scrap this one out.
And I'm not sure about your sort of final 2 games you've played, Subtle, but games like this, when it ends in the 2 Naga players just smashing into each other, basically, can go on for a long time, and you play weird mind games with your opponent because there are access to so many weird techs that can help out. For example, you could start looking at potential ghouls if your opponent goes like Mass Divine Shield, especially with Mantids and such. You can look at more Divine Shields with the help of, say, Selfless, as we can see Yanase go for now. There are so many different ways to build your board, and I found myself like almost changing board state nearly every turn just to try and outthink my opponent, and I think that's what these 2 players are going for right now. My only question is, I was going to say, does the Naga generator really need to still be on the board? And Yanase agrees. No, it does not, and sells it.
Yeah, agreed. I think this is the similar situation to what I was talking about before. Like, technically, he could greed one more turn here, probably, if he really wants to, in terms of just him just staying alive. But you can look at it the other way, right? Opponent at 12. Let's give up my milk now just to be as strong as humanly possible and try and kill my opponent in this spot. 100 Selfless Hero is certainly an interesting tech in this spot. But you are right. The mind games that come just purely from Leroy positioning, and whether you want to taunt Leroy or not, just that individual mind game adds about 3 or 4 different layers to just how you line up your board for this following fight. Double taunted Leroy now on the other side. That Leroy is going to take down an entire Poison Divine Shield, which is massive. that you see there is the reasoning behind swapping all of those stats away from the glow scale, right? Because he knows the Leroys are going to crash into that anyway because it has taunt. So that's a big W. But guess what? We are back once again in one more tie.
Honest, I think the longest game we were on turn 17 in this game. The longest one I had was, I think, 23 turns, and like the last 6 or 7 turns were just this, and we were just drawing every single time.
23.
Yes,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not even. That's not even an exaggeration either. That's just. I'm pretty sure that it was at least 22, and I'm sure there was 1 extra turn past that. So yeah.
Okay.
Crazy stuff. But again, the weird problem now is how each player reacts to their opponent, right? And their opponent's board state. Where can the improvements be made? And the one thing I find most hilarious, Sol, is the players spend so long building up these really big Naga boards to end up selling most of it in the late game and going for like, I want this 6-2 with a death rattle and stuff like, which is a lot of these late games do end up being.
Yeah, it's the Leroy dynamic is very strange because Leroy will, almost always 1-for-1 with an opponent, right? Caveat some crazy beast, Gas Coiler, Mama Bear, resummon thing, which, as mentioned earlier, doesn't really exist at the moment, so you can kind of forget about it. So the dynamic of like, which one of my minions on board, on average, is less than a 1-for-1 with my opponent? Because if that's true of any of your minions, you want to replace them with Leroys over the course of the game, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite strange, considering that over most of the game, they've been 3 or 4-for-1ing your opponent in most spots.
Here we go. I really like this from Yannisei, going for another Bristleback Knight. And just saying Wind Fury, super strong. The Divine Shield going in there, the incredibly high attack. But now we just see just an Amalgam just chilling. I think it was like a 6-7 or 6-8 or something there.
Finally!
It's going to be a win. There we go.
A W, and 6 + 6 makes 12. This is the spot that we've been in for quite some time. Very nicely done. Yeah, I do think that Bristleback Knight is a very cute tech, not something that I've been involving in my gameplay particularly. Obviously, it's very specific to Vol'jin exactly. But just the idea of the frenzy, most importantly, like, yeah, Divine Shield's great, Wind Fury is great, but a Wind Fury irrelevant to sometimes positive, sometimes negative. Wind Fury is a hard thing to quantify in terms of particular board state, but it's the frenzy, right? It's that promise of an additional Divine Shield, and I think opponent SJMR was kind of responding as best he could. The only way to stop all those frenzies and Divine Shields going off is just to kind of lean back into full poison scam on the other side. I think he recognized that he was the smaller of the two players, so he went more heavily into Divine Shield poison, but I think his final push was 1 turn earlier, because it was, as we joined SJMR, he was out of Divine Shields. I think his glow scales were used up and sold, so he didn't have Divine Shields left in his hand to continue to Divine Shield his Poison Murlocs at that point, and that left him in a position where he was always going to struggle from that point. Did very well to find as many Manted Queens and Leroys to fill up as he could, but in the end, Yannisei just did a little bit too much. But congratulations, of course, to all of our players who successfully did the thing. Nagas won the game.
And I think already in game 1 we saw the full, I'm not going to say full, but a large variety of the general playstyles and outcomes, right? Alucard went super early and super value-based, getting that early Tavern, but got punished for the general lack of tempo and weakness by going down so low. Did still manage a top 4 though. We had players such as Sixo and Bofa not get hold of the Naga, and being able to really bank on that, so having to do something different and, getting punished for it, in all honesty. Yeah, they didn't go out in 8th, but still it was pretty bad. And then we had players such as Yannisei, who just did pop off with Naga and then managed to very nicely execute the late game 1v1s, which happens in a large amount of games when both, there are at least 2 players popping off with Naga, which there normally is at the moment.
And this is my question now, just going back, looking at Sal King here. the big question for me is, could more have been made out of that Foe Reaper as a potential solution to the problems that was being on the other side? I don't necessarily think that would be the case because it was so Divine Shield heavy and everything was above 100 on the other side, which would have made it still very difficult, even with the Foe Reaper, to be able to get work done overall. But I do think that was maybe the one route that could have been looked at a little bit more heavily from King, who I believe I was erroneously referring to as SJMR a couple of seconds ago. Apologies for that. But for me, I think it was a very interesting battle in the first game, and I think a good snapshot of what we're going to be looking at for most of the game.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's one of the reasons I was bringing up the Golem Reaper. I'm going to choose to call it going forward. And it was that its attack was relatively low when we're talking about Naga numbers, of course, but also its position, like middle-ish in the row, was kind of strange too, because it didn't look like he was even trying to use it as a Divine Shield breaker, right? You know, okay, if it attacks second or third, I can maybe knock 2 to 3 Divine Shields out, and then that'll help me. So yeah, it didn't really pay off too well, but there you see the leaderboard after the first game here, with Yannisei getting those 7 points, and already eyes will be drawn to the natural top and bottom of this leaderboard. But do you want to just quickly break down why there are suddenly point numbers on this screen, Sottle, that makes it look very messy indeed?
Yeah, so when the players are eliminated at the same time, so if you die and someone else dies at the same time, there were various ways of handling this, but I think in designing the rules for this, Hearthstone Esports decided the best way to handle it, which is the same way that the ladder and the client handles it, which is if you die at the same time as your opponent, even though you are arbitrarily assigned which one of you came 6th or 7th, for example, your MMR gain in terms of ladder is split evenly between the players who tie for the same place. So that is essentially the same thing that we are doing for Lobby Legends. So if you die at the same time as someone else, it's the point for the 2 positions you died in, added together, and then divided by 2. Same if 3 players die at the same time, but divided by 3, and so on. And that's why you might see some fractional and decimal scores coming out on our leaderboards. But hopefully you can all follow along as we get to 1 decimal place of significant data.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't keep going wider and wider, it's like, yeah, 0.345621. I'll be able to keep up just about.
It says a lot about your brain that when called upon to do a random string of numbers, it was just consecutive. 3, 4, 5, 6.
Point proven, I think you'll find, Sottle. Point proven indeed. Well, that was the first game of our first lobby of the day. Feels like it went by in a flash, but we've got plenty more where that came up. We're going to go to a quick break while we set up game number 2 of Lobby A, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.